The 20th of July, 1969. The entire world watches as Neil Armstrong takes humanity's first step on the moon. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. It's an American triumph, a victory of democracy over tyranny, science over fear. But here's what they didn't tell you on that historic day. The man who designed the Saturn V rocket that carried Armstrong to the moon, Wernher von Braun, was a former Nazi SS officer, a man who helped Hitler build the V-2 rocket that killed thousands of civilians in London. And he wasn't alone. Over 1,600 Nazi scientists, engineers, and technicians were secretly brought to America after World War II. Many were war criminals. Some had conducted experiments in concentration camps. Others had designed weapons of mass destruction. The US government gave them new identities, erased their Nazi pasts, and put them to work building America's space program, weapons systems, and intelligence networks. The operation's codename? Paperclip. Tonight, we're exposing the secret deal that changed history, the moral compromise that put former Nazis at the heart of American science. This is Voices from WW2, and the truth about Operation Paperclip will shock you. Before we dive into this explosive story, hit that subscribe button. What you're about to learn was classified for decades. The CIA, the Pentagon, and NASA all worked to hide these men's Nazi pasts. But the truth is finally coming out. Subscribe and turn on notifications because Voices from WW2 reveals the secrets they buried. April 1945. Nazi Germany is collapsing. Soviet forces are closing in from the east. American and British troops advance from the west. Hitler's 1,000-year Reich has just weeks to live. But while soldiers fight for Berlin, another war is already beginning, a war for knowledge. Both the United States and the Soviet Union know the truth. Whoever captures Germany's scientists and technology will dominate the post-war world. By 1945, Nazi Germany had achieved terrifying technological breakthroughs. V-2 rockets, the world's first ballistic missiles, capable of striking targets 200 miles away at supersonic speeds. Jet aircraft, the Messerschmitt, Me-262, the first operational jet fighter, vastly superior to Allied propeller planes. Nerve agents, Tabun and sarin, chemical weapons far deadlier than anything the Allies possessed. Submarine technology, Type XXI U-boats with revolutionary designs that would influence submarine warfare for decades. American intelligence realized, we're not just fighting Germany, we're racing to capture the future. The United States had just spent $2 billion developing the atomic bomb. It required the world's greatest scientific minds, many of them European refugees fleeing Nazi persecution. Now, American military planners asked themselves, what if Germany's rocket scientists fell into Soviet hands? What if Stalin's regime got the V-2 technology? The answer was unacceptable. In the final months of the war, the US military launched secret missions to find and capture German scientists before the Soviets could. Teams of specialists, scientists, intelligence officers, interrogators fanned out across Germany. They had target lists, names, locations, priorities. Their mission: find these men, secure their research, and get them to America, by any means necessary. The operation's initial code name was Overcast. Later, it would be renamed Paperclip, referring to the paperclips attached to the scientists' files, marking them for extraction to the United States. At the top of the American target list was one name, Wernher von Braun. Von Braun was the technical director of Germany's V-2 rocket program, a brilliant engineer, a visionary, and a member of the Nazi SS with the rank of Sturmbannführer equivalent to major. On the 2nd of May 1945, as Germany surrendered, von Braun and 500 of his top scientists surrendered to American forces. They brought with them tons of documents, blueprints, and partially assembled rockets. Von Braun made a calculated decision: surrender to the Americans, not the Soviets. He knew the Americans would value his knowledge. The Soviets might execute him. He was right. Within weeks, von Braun and his team were on their way to the United States. The man who built Hitler's vengeance weapons was about to become America's rocket hero. But first, the US government had to hide who he really was. Here's the problem the US government faced. American immigration law explicitly prohibited admitting Nazis and war criminals into the country. President Truman had signed an executive order. No one with active Nazi Party membership or who supported Nazi militarism could enter the United States. But the military wanted these scientists desperately. So they made a decision that would haunt American history. They lied. Intelligence officers systematically altered the scientists' records. They removed references to SS membership, Nazi Party affiliation, involvement in slave labor programs, war crimes investigations. The national interest requires that we exploit these men's knowledge, regardless of their political past. Arthur Rudolph, who managed the Mittelwerk factory where V-2 rockets were built using slave labor from concentration camps, had his file sanitized. Officials wrote, "Nothing in his records suggests ardent Nazi. In reality, at Mittelwerk, an estimated 20,000 concentration camp prisoners died from starvation, disease, and brutal working conditions. More people died building V-2 rockets than were killed by them." By 1947, Operation Paperclip had brought over 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians to the United States. They included 700-plus aerospace engineers, chemical weapons specialists, biological warfare experts, intelligence and psychological warfare specialists, medical researchers, some with horrific pasts. They were given American identities, housed on military bases, and put to work on classified projects. Von Braun and his rocket team were sent to Fort Bliss, Texas, and the White Sands Proving Ground in New Mexico. Here, they taught American engineers everything they knew about rocketry. They reassembled captured V-2 rockets and launched them in tests that formed the foundation of America's missile program. The irony? Jewish refugees who fled Nazi Germany were now working alongside former Nazis in the American desert. Not everyone supported Operation Paperclip. Many Americans were horrified. Albert Einstein publicly opposed bringing Nazi scientists to America. The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists warned of moral contamination. Some FBI agents investigating Nazi war crimes protested the whitewashing of records. But the Cold War was beginning. The Soviets had the atomic bomb by 1949. The Korean War started in 1950. America needed every edge it could get, and so the program continued. Think about that for a moment. Men who built weapons for Hitler, who oversaw slave labor camps, were now designing America's rockets. Does the end justify the means? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this story is blowing your mind, hit that like button. Meanwhile, the Soviets were doing exactly the same thing, but with less subtlety. On the 22nd of October 1946, Soviet forces rounded up over 2,200 German specialists and their families in the middle of the night and transported them to the USSR. Among them, Helmut Grotrup, another V-2 engineer who'd chosen to stay in the Soviet zone. The Soviets extracted knowledge, replicated German technology, and eventually developed their own space program. Unlike the Americans, they didn't pretend these weren't former Nazis. They just didn't care. What did Operation Paperclip actually achieve? Let's look at the results. Rocketry. Took humans to the moon. Chemical weapons. German nerve agent research became the basis for America's chemical weapons program. Aerospace. Wind tunnel designs, aerodynamics research, and aircraft innovations all came from German scientists. Medicine. This is where it gets darker. Some paperclip scientists had conducted experiments in concentration camps. Their research, obtained through torture and murder, was quietly incorporated into American medical knowledge. By the 1950 seconds, former Nazi scientists were at the heart of America's most advanced programs. And one man in particular was about to become a national hero. 1952. Wernher von Braun appears in Collier's magazine, detailing his vision for space exploration. He writes about space stations, moon landings, and Mars missions. America falls in love with him. In 1955, he appears on Walt Disney's television show, explaining rocketry to millions of viewers. Children see him as a visionary. Adults see him as the future. No one mentions his SS uniform. No one talks about Mittelwerk. His Nazi past is buried deep. 1960. Von Braun becomes the director of NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. He is now one of the most prominent scientists in America. He dines with presidents. He appears on magazine covers. He is the father of the American space program. His team of former German engineers, many also ex-Nazis, dominates American rocketry. The 16th of July 1969. The Saturn V rocket, von Braun's masterpiece, launches Apollo 11 toward the moon. It works perfectly. 4 days later, Neil Armstrong steps onto the lunar surface. Von Braun watches from mission control. He has achieved his childhood dream, sending humans into space. But he's done it for a different country than the one he served in the 1940 seconds. Standing beside him are other paperclip scientists, men with similar pasts, similar secrets, but by the 1970 seconds and 1980 seconds, journalists and historians began uncovering the truth. Investigations revealed von Braun personally selected concentration camp prisoners for labor at Mittelwerk. He visited the camps multiple times, witnessing the brutal conditions. He knew slaves were dying by the thousands to build his rockets. He never expressed remorse or took responsibility. In 1984, Arthur Rudolph von Braun's deputy and later a key NASA engineer was investigated for war crimes. Rather than face prosecution, he renounced his US citizenship and fled to West Germany. Von Braun's defenders argue he was a scientist, not an ideologue. He joined the Nazi Party and SS because it was required to advance his research. His focus was always space exploration, not weapons. He had no direct role in the atrocities at the camps. Critics respond. He wore the SS uniform willingly. He prioritized his career over basic human decency. Thousands died so he could build rockets. After the war, he never apologized or acknowledged the suffering. Von Braun died in 1977, celebrated as an American hero. The moral complexity of his life remains unresolved. Von Braun wasn't alone. Hundreds of other former Nazis contributed to American science. Hubertus Strughold, called the father of space medicine, investigated for conducting experiments on prisoners at Dachau, never charged. His name was on a NASA research facility until 2017. Kurt Blome researched biological warfare for Nazi Germany, admitted experimenting with plague vaccines on concentration camp prisoners, brought to America anyway, worked for the US Army Chemical Corps. Walter Schreiber, Nazi medical officer who oversaw freezing experiments on prisoners, worked for the USS Air Force until his past was exposed and he fled to Argentina. The list goes on. So here's the question that haunts Operation Paperclip. Was it worth it? Did getting to the moon justify harboring war criminals? Did defeating the Soviets require compromising our values? To understand Operation Paperclip, you have to understand the fear that gripped America in the late 1940 seconds and 1950 seconds. The Soviet Union had the atomic bomb. China fell to communism. The Korean War raged. Americans built bomb shelters. Schools held nuclear attack drills. The prevailing belief: if we don't use these scientists, the Soviets will get them. and we'll lose the Cold War. From this perspective, Operation Paperclip wasn't about forgiving Nazis. It was about survival. Here's what Operation Paperclip led to. The US developed ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, before the Soviets. American satellite technology gave us early warning systems. The space race, won by America in 1969, demonstrated technological superiority. Military planners argue, without Paperclip, the Cold War could have gone very differently. Soviet dominance in missiles and space could have emboldened aggression. The world could have fallen to communism. Maybe Operation Paperclip saved the free world. Or maybe that's just how we justify the unjustifiable. Paperclip wasn't just about rockets. Nazi intelligence officers were recruited to spy on the Soviets. Former Gestapo and SS officers were employed by the CIA's predecessor, the Office of Strategic Services, OSS. They provided intelligence on Soviet military capabilities, political structures, and espionage networks. Some of these men had blood on their hands, but American intelligence valued their knowledge of communist systems. Once you justify recruiting war criminals for their knowledge, where do you draw the line? If it's okay to recruit SS officers who oversaw slave labor, is it okay to recruit concentration camp doctors? If we can overlook participation in genocide for the sake of intelligence, what won't we overlook? Operation Paperclip opened a door, and through that door came decades of moral compromises. This is one of history's hardest questions. If you had been President Truman, would you have approved Operation Paperclip? Knowing what you know now, was it the right decision? Tell us in the comments. By the 1,990 seconds, declassified documents revealed the full extent of Operation Paperclip. Historians, journalists, and survivors of the Holocaust demanded accountability. But most of the Paperclip scientists were dead. Von Braun died in 1977. Rudolph fled in 1984. Others lived out their lives in comfortable American retirement. There was no justice, no trials, no reckoning. Just the uncomfortable truth that America's greatest technological achievements were built, in part, by men who served history's most evil regime. Let's be honest about what Operation Paperclip gave America. Space exploration, the moon landing, the space shuttle, the International Space Station. None of it happens without von Braun's team. Military technology, ICBM defense systems, satellite surveillance, missile accuracy, all built on German foundations. Scientific knowledge, advances in aerodynamics, materials science, and propulsion that accelerated American innovation. These achievements are real. They're undeniable. But here's what we sacrificed: moral authority. How can America claim to be the defender of human rights while harboring war criminals? Justice for victims. Thousands of concentration camp survivors watched their tormentors escape punishment and live comfortable lives in America. Historical honesty. For decades, we lied about who these men were. We erased their crimes from the record. These losses are also real, also undeniable. So we're left with an impossible moral equation: achievement versus atrocity, victory versus values, progress versus principles. There's no clean answer. Anyone who tells you there is hasn't thought about it hard enough. Operation Paperclip isn't just history, it raises questions that remain relevant today. When should we compromise our values for security? Can knowledge obtained through evil means be used for good? Do we judge historical figures by their contributions or their crimes? These questions don't go away. Every generation must answer them again. Here's what gets lost in the arguments: the people. The concentration camp survivors who saw von Braun celebrated on television. The American soldiers who liberated the camps, wondering why their government was protecting the men who built them. The families of V, 2 victims in London, watching Nazi scientists become American heroes. Their pain doesn't fit neatly into calculations of strategic advantage. Did Operation Paperclip help America win the Cold War? Probably yes. Did it contribute to putting humans on the moon? Absolutely yes. Did it betray the values America claims to stand for? Also yes. All of these things can be true at once. History is complicated. People are complicated. And the choices nations make in times of crisis are the most complicated of all. So what's the truth about Operation Paperclip? The truth is this: America made a deal with the devil. We brought Nazi war criminals to our shores, gave them new lives, and used their knowledge to build rockets and win a war. We benefited enormously from that decision, and we'll never be able to fully wash the moral stain from it. Wernher von Braun helped put humans on the moon. He also helped work thousands of people to death in concentration camps. Both facts are true. Neither erases the other. What do you think? Was Operation Paperclip justified? Would you have made the same decision in 1945? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments. This is a conversation worth having. And if this documentary opened your eyes to the moral complexity of history, do me a favor. Subscribe to Voices from WW2. We're uncovering the stories they didn't want told, the operations they kept classified, the truth that makes us uncomfortable. Next week, we're investigating another shocking World War II secret, Unit 731, Japan's biological warfare program, and the American cover-up that followed. It's worse than you can imagine. And yes, America made another deal you won't believe. Hit that notification bell, because the truth about World War II is darker and stranger than any fiction. This has been Voices from WW2. Keep questioning, keep discovering, and never stop demanding the truth.